South Carolina Senator Tim Scott on Sunday suspended his 2024 campaign. Scott struggled to gain traction in polls among a crowded candidate field with a clear frontrunner. With 2 months until the Iowa caucuses, there are still 7 hopefuls in the race. CBS News has 3 of them: Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, and Doug Burgum, polling at 2% or less. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins me now. Major, what do you make of the Scott campaign, and does it tell us anything about this race and where the race stands at the moment?
So talking to Republicans all day today, John, a couple of themes emerged. One, Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, has a very good biography that most Republicans found very enticing. They liked his biography, liked his demeanor, they liked his optimistic approach on the campaign trail. But they did not see him as a nominee or future president for this country, a nominee of the Republican Party and then president of the country. They do see him possibly as former President Trump, should he become the Republican nominee's running mate. And that idea that he wasn't quite ready for the presidency, or he was better suited to be a running mate for someone else in the minds of Republican voters, better prepared, is what always, according to Republicans I talked to today, held Tim Scott back. And it also underscores something that you've experienced in politics, and so have I. Biography gets you in the conversation, but you need to have a second act. And it's very clear, very evident from Republicans I talked to today, John, that they did not believe that Senator Scott demonstrated that second act in Iowa, New Hampshire, or anywhere else.
So what of that discussion about Scott as a vice presidential candidate? His campaign was just tonally so different than everything we've experienced during the Trump years. Is there a real chance that he's going to be part of that conversation? And how would you fit those two things together?
So the theory of the case for Tim Scott always went something like this, John. Ron DeSantis would give former President Trump a real run for his money, and the two of them would war with one another all through the summer, each taking shots at one another. And in that process, former President Trump's poll numbers would drop, and the aggravation between the two of them might become so discordant that Republican voters might shy away from it or tire of it, and that would create an opening for someone who was less pugilistic rhetorically and in presentation and more optimistic. Well, that never happened. That theory of the case never got a chance. Why? Because Ron DeSantis didn't bring Donald Trump back to earth. If anything, former President Trump dispatched Ron DeSantis during the summertime, assembled this massive lead, and there just was no place for Tim Scott as that optimistic alternative to be viewed seriously, because nobody was looking actively for an alternative, and that was always the assumption that Tim Scott had. So he's left with possible addition to a ticket if former President Trump's the nominee and is so inclined, or, as one of his advisors said to me today, senator for life, and that's not bad either.
And finally, Major, let me rely on your longtime coverage of Donald Trump. In a speech over the weekend, the former president referred to his political opponents as vermin. He's also talked about how if he were elected president, he would not shy away from using his position and the powers of the office to go after political opponents. You've heard a lot of Trump speeches. Put this in context for us.
These are speeches darker than any previous speeches former President Trump has given, as a former president, or as a candidate for the presidency in 2016, and they're not close. These were prepared remarks, John. This was not riffing or going off script, and it is something that is now clearly intentional for the former president. He wants historians, or even nominal historians, to go back to the language of Mussolini and Hitler and say it's Trumpian, and say, no, you're just reading too much into it, even though these are prepared remarks. And John, you know and I know, no one seeking the presidency or in the presidency would ever consider using language of this kind because of its historical resonance. On that score, the former president doesn't care, believes his base is not only receptive, but hungry for it, and he wants to continue to deliver to them. The one thing this tells me, John, though, is that there's something brittle about that approach. Why keep feeding the base if you're so secure it's there? That tells me within the inner circles of the Trump campaign, there is some anxiety about the durability, the resilience of that base once tested. It hasn't been tested yet, but this rhetoric suggests they feel the need to feed it, and that may signal a kind of vulnerability that's not clearly apparent as we talk this evening.
Major Garrett in Washington, we're always grateful for you, Major. Thank you.